Good evening and welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm Rick Morelli. We here on Inside Scoop have been trying our best over the last few months to keep you up to date with the ongoing developments in the Hazleton area school district regarding the Bishop Hafey building as well as the Can-Do building. On our shows in the past, we've had school board members Carmeli and Kevich, Brian Early and Dr. Childs. We've had former superintendent, Sam Morelli here. And tonight on our show, we have school board president, Mr. Clarence John. Also here with me tonight is my co-host, Mike DeCosmo. Dr. Dave Sosar could not make it this evening. Mr. John, good to see you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
We appreciate you coming on here, and I want to set the tone right now. In case you and I disagree tonight, you're not going to go out and write a letter against me, are you?
No, never.
Okay,
Never do that.
okay, I just want to make that clear. But no, we appreciate you coming on. As you know, we're trying to give the public as much information, and as you could see, and we want to get your comments. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of different school board members, administrators talking some different things regarding these building programs. But before we get into the building programs, there's an ongoing debate regarding Sam Morelli, and I'll just throw it out to you. What can you tell us regarding that situation with Mr. Morelli?
I really can't make a statement on that, Rick, because there may be some legal action in the future. And I certainly don't want to put anything out there that may come back and haunt everybody, including myself. Okay. So I can't talk about that.
Okay, we could respect that. And when Mr. Morelli was on our show, he did mention something of that sort. So we will leave it at that. But moving forward, since we can't discuss that, we do want to talk about the ongoing building programs. And there's a lot. There's obviously the wheels are in motion with Bishop Hafey. With the Can-Do building, and what's happening? What's the latest here right now?
Well, Thursday night's committee meeting on the agenda is I believe it's $10.5 million bond issue to be put out there for consideration. I would assume at this stage in the game that both buildings will be bought.
Okay. Now that $10 million is to buy both buildings.
That is correct.
But that what still needs to be done, obviously Hafey, there needs to be renovations, and obviously with Can-Do, depending on what that school will be used for, which we'll talk in a little bit, they'll need renovations. So you'll have to most likely borrow more money to build. Do you know what those costs would be at this point in time?
We've had several figures from the architect as the additional amount of money. However, I don't believe that until I see more of a itemized list, and I'll give you an example. We know that Bishop Hafey, we have to put in an elevator. We know new windows have to go in, probably a new boiler. The building would have to be hardwired for computers and everything else. And who knows what you're going to find when you get into doing that kind of that kind of construction. As far as what's going to be needed in furniture, et cetera, and so on, I don't think we have any idea. We don't know if Bishop Hafey left anything there in the diocese. I would assume it's gutted. Nothing's left in there. So we have to buy all of that furniture and equipment. As far as the Can-Do building goes, that's a shell. Mm-hmm. And that has to be constructed from the very, very bottom up. It's a lot easier to do it there because of the fact the walls are open. I don't think that, I talked to Mr. Briggs, who's in charge of technology. It should not be as big a job to do the technology there as it would be, say, at Hafey. But we have to wait to see what that's going to be also.
But here's the thing. The borrowing of money is just to purchase and to redo the buildings. Correct. The major costs will come with the teachers, the transportation, and everything else. And that's the amount of extra revenue that goes out to the taxpayers. Okay, right. Even though the bond issues are tied into the overall yearly revenue in the budget, that's the key question. I look back on the budgets. In the last 5 years since I left the board, the budget has increased over $23 million, and that's without any type of building project, other than what's going on with McAdoo, okay? I shouldn't say other project, McAdoo is going on. But $23 million is where it's at, and that's the key question. What people want to know is can we afford both? And I will go back to when Sam Morelli was on our show. He did say he adamantly was against buying both schools because we could not afford both. And, Mike, I'll throw that to you. I mean, you've been on the board. You understand the financial aspects. That's the question. What we're trying to get at is what's the total cost of this going to be? Did the board move too fast in buying both buildings rather than just taking their time?
Well, a couple points here, Rick. And once again, I don't want to say the public might feel they're being hoodwinked, and I think that's where the questions are. Every single person I spoke to about HAFI was in favor of the HAFI purchase. I didn't talk to one person, and I mentioned on this show before, I mean, I've been at schools recently as 6, 7 years ago. I mean, HAFI is a good school. I think we got a good bang for our buck there, Mr. John. I really do. But the unknown here is, what are we going to do with that Valley School? People don't know. We've discussed this before. Is it going to be a charter school? Is it going to be a cyber school? Or people buying it with the intention to make it a Valley High School? And if they're buying it with the intention to make it a Valley High School, I mean, that's fine, but be honest about it. That's all the public wants. And if that's the case, Rick, then in getting into these bond issues, as you know, Mr. John, I mean, we have to watch, because, you know, it's okay to go take one bond issue, but if you go back and try and refinance these bond issues, then you worry about the arbitrage issues, which the Hazleton School District has gotten in trouble with before. You know, I think if people said what the purpose was going to be for, and if we knew we had to borrow, I think we could have a much better discussion about the Valley.
Well, and I want to bring this up, and I'm not bringing it up to pick on anyone, but this is a fact, and I'm going to quote what was in the paper going back to, I believe it was in 2006 or 2007. There was a group out there called HAROS, Hazleton Area Residents Against Large Schools, and Mr. Early, who's on the board and running for re-election, was president of that group. Now, when they first came out, and they were coming to the meetings when I was there, asking for a feasibility study, and what they were saying was that, well, we want smaller schools or smaller classrooms. Well, everyone wants that. But what really caught me when I was on the board and I was following their meetings in Freeland, and this was in the newspaper, Sam Golsky wrote it, when the vice president of that group stood up at the meeting and said, it takes 5 votes for a school in the Valley. That's when I said, time out here. Is this for smaller schools, or is this for a school in a certain part of the district? And that's wrong, in my opinion. Now, I'm not accusing anybody, but that was a fact that was said in the past, and that's why it's our job, as well as the public's job, to ask those legitimate questions. And that's what we want to make sure is this something that's being pushed by certain members for the right reasons, or is it for personal reasons?
That's a good point, Rick. I agree with Mike. I think if people were to come out and say to us or to me or to anyone, this is our agenda and this is what we want to do and why we want to do it, I can respect it. I don't have to agree with it, but I certainly can respect it. I would rather be upfront and out to the public and say, this is our agenda, this is why we want it. But I think a lot of points that we have to look at is the magnet school belongs at HAFI. And I'm going to give you a couple examples as to why. If you want to take, and I'm going to use Mr. Edmondson, who is one heck of a teacher, and I think anybody who's ever had him knows he is. If we were to send Mr. Edmondson down there to teach one class, and he was only going to teach one class there, we would have to give him a prep period and a traveling period. So out of the course of his day of 4 periods, he'd only be teaching 2. Would he want to go down there? My understanding is he doesn't want any parts of it going down to the Valley if that becomes a magnet school. A magnet school is like a shop in the Career Center. The first year, it's level 1. Second year, it's level 2. Third year, it's level 3. And the fourth year, it's level 4. If it's a true magnet school, are we going to open that building up the first year for 90 kids? I don't know. There's rumors about, well, we can take anybody in there we want to put in there. If that's the case, then to me, it's going to be a Valley school. And we also have to remember, if it becomes a high school, it's going to become a magnet school, or not a magnet school, a school of choice, which means any student can petition to go down there because the high school is in school improvement. So anybody who wants to request to go down to the Valley School will have the opportunity to go down if it becomes a Valley High School. Right now, I understand in the district, there have only been 11 students throughout the whole district who have taken advantage of the school choice in the elementary middle schools up until now. But who knows what's going to happen then. And one of the things that you did bring up, we don't have no idea of the cost factors, none.
Well, and that's the question. It's easy to go out and buy buildings because you're going to finance them over 20, 30 years, and that's really not going to impact the budget all that much. But where it's going to impact the budget, and I said this before on the show, and I'll say it again, I approached Mr. Reba specifically and said, what have you factored in? And he said somewhere between both buildings, $6 to $8 million in extra revenue. You had a hard time balancing the budget last time. You had to go back to the teachers and asking for a pay freeze. Yes. That's not going to happen next time, especially what happened with Mr. Morelli talking with teachers out there. So where's the revenue going to come from? And that's the thing. And what you're saying here, and yet what we've heard, we don't know what this building is going to be used for. And I've heard other board members say, well, we bought the building to avoid the charter school from coming in. Well, let me tell you something. You don't go buy buildings to avoid another project from coming into town. That's the wrong reason. And that is another point, because the charter school most likely will be coming in someplace, and that is another factor that you're going to have to look at and say, if they put that school in the district somewhere, you're going to have kids who are going to leave, and it's going to cost the district money for the charter school.
My understanding, Rick and Mike, is that with the purchase of Bishop Hayfie, we're going to pick up approximately 26 rooms. Okay. With the McAdoo coming online, we're going to pick up 14. So it's an extra 40 classrooms we're going to pick up. Will that take care of all the trailers? It should. Mm-hmm. It should take care of all the trailers. Are we going to need extra rooms? That's a possibility. But you brought a very good point up. If the charter school comes on, will we have excess classrooms? That's a very good point. Plus, a lot of people I don't think realize, and you'll hear all these commercials, charter schools cost taxpayers nothing. That's a lie. It will cost the school district the reimbursement per student, which is approximately $6,200. Yep. So if 300 kids go down there or 500 kids go down there, you figure we're going to lose between $3 and $4 million. Mm-hmm. So how's that going to impact our budget? Again, what are we going to have to do? Are we going to have to lay people off? No, we can't lay people off. The only way we could do that, possibly, is by going from 32 credits to 28 to 24. So if we went to the high school level, secondary level, and we said, okay, we can make it 24 credits, which is reducing it by 25%. Does that equate to reducing the teaching staff by 25%? That's interesting. Those are the things we have no idea about.
And Mr. John, just to really expound on one point you made about Mr. Edmondson, you know, so much of our discussion on this show and within the general public has been about the cost involved. But, you know, you take a man like Adam Edmondson, and everyone realized one of the best teachers in the state, not just in the Hazleton School District, but if you're cutting his teaching load by 50%, I can't see where a lot of these moves are educationally sound even, Rick. You know, I mean, you know, it's not only the cost, but the kids are going to suffer in the long run, too.
Right. And that's I think what I've been saying is I don't know if this board, because there's so many board members saying so many different things, that it has been well thought out. And I guess my concern is that did the board act too quickly on both of these buildings? And again, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of facts here as to what direction they're going, but that's where we're trying to go with. But gentlemen, let's take a quick break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Inside Scoop. We're here with School Board President, Mr. Clarence John. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside Scoop. We are here with the Hazleton Area School Board President, Mr. Clarence John. Again, continuing our conversation regarding the building plans, and we're talking about the teachers being able to, if they're going down to Can-Do. One of the benefits of Hayfie is it's on campus. Using Mr. Edmondson as an example, if you do have a charter school, and maybe, and again, you said this before, you start small because you don't know how many students will go there. You could have Mr. Edmondson start at the high school in the morning and then go across the street in the afternoon, as well as any other teacher, using him as an example. You're not going to have that if you go down down the valley, no. And that's a problem. Again, and the other problem we have to talk about is, in all due respect, there's no one who's against education. But there's a fine balance between education and the senior citizens and the taxpayers out there. And I could tell you from myself being out there, taxpayers are saying, time out, what about us? We've paid our taxes. We don't have our kids going to school, which brings up another conversation with property taxes. But that is where the balance is, and you say, you know, there's too much on the taxpayers, and you have to be cognizant of that. I mean, that's part of this problem is that no one knows what the final costs are going to be. And the problem is that you're not going to see this for a couple of years until it's too late and it hits your tax bill.
Now, one of the things they did discuss is the fact that it would take about $300,000 and some a year to satisfy this bond issue. And $240,000, I think, would be MPB is gone after next year. Mm-hmm. So part of that $300,000 and some would be our $240,000, which is already being spent.
Right.
So it wouldn't be that much of an increase as far as the purchase of that buildings. However, they didn't estimate that it would cost between, I believe, somewhere between $18 million and $19 million to upgrade both facilities. But I don't know if that includes labs, books. I think one of the things you have to remember, if you go across the street, all you're doing is taking the 9th grade building across the street. Yeah. So everybody goes with them.
And I'm going to challenge those numbers for a simple reason. McAdoo, when they first projected McAdoo was $3 to $4 million, it's costing $10 million for only 200 students. Architects do this. I've witnessed it, and that's why I question this. They come in, they'll throw you this number. By the time it's all said and done, it's way over that. I challenge the fact that you will spend only $19, $20 million on 2 buildings when it's all said and done. And again, let's remember, that's not including the extra revenue of teachers, transportation, heating
Correct.
costs, and everything else. And that's the thing. Reimbursement. Board members are saying you're going to get 66% reimbursement for this. I challenge that statement as well.
My understanding, the 66%, which is our reimbursement rate, would be based upon site acquisition. And since the sites are already completed and constructed, that does not come into play. The best way to find that out would be to talk to Tony Reba. My understanding is, if I understand Mr. Reba correctly, we would get reimbursed, I think there are $6,200 for each kid, each student that we put into those buildings. I don't think it's 66 2/3. That's for site acquisition. I could be wrong in that, but I think that's my understanding on that.
Yeah. Moving forward, we can't touch upon Mr. Morelli. I respect that. What's going on with the search? I mean, Dr. Antonelli is acting. Are they going to hire him, or are you going to continue doing a search?
The only thing I can say about that, when this transpired, we were on the phone with our labor attorney, Mr. Beard, and he was instructed by the board at that point in time to do a search for us, and he was going to contact a couple educators who were involved in that kind of search. And as of today, I have not heard anything since then. But Mr. Beard will be in town on Thursday, tomorrow, and we'll approach him on that, see where we're at.
Yeah.
And again, Mr. John, I don't need to tell you how controversial it was with the public, just that $50,000 for that search. Well, we came back to the 2 people in our district, and we ended up choosing Mr. Morelli at that time. But once again, one of the public's problems, and I won't even say my problem, but one of the public's problems, I think, with the current school district is it's the old military principle that any organization should be too deep. You know, and we have some people there. I look at Mr. Antonelli, and I look at his age, and I look at his years of service. I know he could retire tomorrow. I look at someone like Mr. Basic, who might be number 2 or 3 in command. You know, I'm sure he has the years and time. And, you know, if we lose these people, I mean, what's going to happen? And I know no one's irreplaceable, but, you know, since you've been there, I mean, has the district, or has the board, I guess, you know, talked about a plan of action rather than doing these searches and spending money, where we could either promote from within, or, you know, what kind of policy we're going to have to replace these people?
I think, Mike, to answer your question, I think everybody has an opportunity to apply for the position, whether it's from within or without. As far as monetary and asking what it's going to cost to do a search, that has not even come up, to be perfectly honest with you. I think our district is big enough to hire from within. I really believe that. However, sometimes it takes an opportunity to look for somebody from the outside who can come in and say, well, wait, let's take a fresh picture of this. Because sometimes when we're within, we don't see the whole, as Mr. Andrews would say, the whole gestalt. And maybe somebody from the outside can come in and say, well, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what we have to do. Mr. Antonelli, as of now, he's doing a fine job. No question about it. Is he the pick? I don't know. You know the board's going to change come November anyway. So that's a question that can't be answered. A couple of these other questions we're talking about today can't be answered either until we see what the board is going to come out in the end of November.
One of the things I would like to see, and I'm going to parlay this into what we're doing in the county, we're writing specific codes, because you're going to have a similar situation where you're going to have a manager, and there's specific language that the council cannot dictate to that manager. And there's specific language in these codes that if council members overstep their boundaries, there will be sanctions, there could be fines. And I would like to see the same thing take place of policies to be placed with school board members, that if they overstep their boundaries with micromanaging and trying to dictate in the school district, because the person you have to hire needs to be able to have that flexibility to make his or her decisions. Not to say they shouldn't be accountable, but I would like to see the same thing take place, as well as some type of language in the new contract that eliminates board members from trying to dictate. Because again, if we mentioned this, we've seen in the past, the last 3 superintendents basically in some way, shape, or form not being able to move forward because of interference, quite frankly, with board members who want their way. And last search, we spent, was $30,000 to get only a handful of people. In the county right now with this new government, they have over 70 applicants just based off of a couple $100 putting advertisements out in the newspapers and on the websites. What does that tell you about people questioning to come into the 16th largest school district in the state of Pennsylvania? There's a track record here that no one wants to be here for a short period of time. And so, you know, those are some things I would like to see when the search comes on. And you do need to have someone, but you need to have that, let that person do their job and not have the interference with the board.
Rick, just take that one step further. I talked to a very highly respected administrator from another school district, but he has strong roots to Hazleton. I spoke to him this summer and I said, would you consider applying for the superintendent position? He said 2 things. He said, number one, he said the politics. He said, I would never go back there. He said, but the price. He said, the Hazleton superintendent, he said, is really underpaid for the size of the district, comparatively speaking, throughout the state. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, especially taxpayers, but if you're going to get someone with a good background, I think the price is going to have to go up also.
Yeah. Well, and again, you know, if you're going to get that price, you have to be able to get your money's worth, and that's the key thing.
Well, one of the things I would like to mention, you touched upon it, was that we had a meeting, an executive session one night, and I made the comment to several board members. I said, I would never go in and tell you how to run your business because it's not my expertise. I said, how dare you come in here and tell the administrators and the educators how to run the school district? And I think that's what you just hit upon.
That's exactly
the micromanaging part of it. Because if I went in and I told Brian Early how to run his business or Bob Childs how to run theirs, that'd tell me where to go. Yeah. And the thing of it is, let's let the educators do their job. Let them make the decisions, and then let's us look at them and say, okay, this is a good idea.
It's fine. Your job is to ask questions and to hold them accountable, and you're allowed to do that. But I'm totally against board members who sometimes don't have even a college degree going in and tell people who have their master's degree and over 30 years experience how to do their job, and that's a problem. Before we close with one other issue, in today's paper, it talks about the Hazleton area is going to be in a pilot program looking at new teacher evaluations. Governor Corbett has put some new things out there. What could you tell us about this? What's good, what's bad about it?
Well, the only thing, I don't like anything that Mr. Corbett has done so far. I just found out the other day he was actually a teacher in Pine Grove when he first started out, and I can't believe that he was a teacher. I don't know, that's what I was told. Anyway, let's put it that way. I can't see how merit pay and going in and evaluating a teacher on the progression of their students is a good idea if everything was on the table and it was fair. And I'm going to go back to when Mr. Mussolini was principal of the high school. Every teacher in the high school, in the academics, had a slow class. Every teacher had a vocational class. Everybody had, it was fair, it was split out. Some teachers don't have that opportunity to teach the higher kids. So their achievement of those students aren't going to be as great as somebody up at the upper level kids. That would be my major concern if it's going to be based upon the progression of their students. There are many, 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 many fine teachers in our school district. And I think one of the board members makes the comment, well, we never get rid of anybody. Yes, the school district has gotten rid of people. They've let them resign. And you guys know that. You were both on the board. Those people are asked to resign, and they resign. Yeah. So rather than embarrass them or whatever, they let them go out with dignity.
Yeah, and as you know, Mr. John, the evaluation process always scares me. I mean, who's going to be doing the evaluation? If you have one person at the evaluation committee that doesn't like you, maybe a school board member who you've been unfriendly to, I mean, are all the evaluations going to be done fair? And Mr. John makes the great point, and I've always said about education, anyone could teach the good students, you know, but now you're giving someone with the slower students or the medium students, you know, are you going to have different standards for how far their students have come? I mean, what's the criteria going to be? It's going to be, there's going to be a lot of a lot of data there that's not going to be quantifiable. It's going to be very subjective.
Well, one of the things that they probably should do is have an independent board, naming 5 or 6 people of this sort, board members, administrators, people from the public who sit on this, who will have to evaluate if there's any wrongdoing. But again, that becomes political as well. And I think, as you said before, you know, all these students come in different shapes and sizes, and sometimes when you get put in a bad area of the school, in the school of some tough for students to teach, I should say, it's a little unfair, and we have to be careful with that.
I'd like to go back and make one comment. When I first started in this district, I was a greebie, as Mike well knows, and my principal there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Malatak, one of the finest administrators I've ever worked with. And at the end of the year, I went to him and I said, Mr. Malatak, you never came in to observe me. You have to observe me. And he said, Clarence, he said, how many times did I walk past your room during the day? I said, many times. My door was never shut. He said, if you think I'm going to come in and watch you put a show on for me, you're mistaken. He said, I got everything I needed to know about what you were doing in your class when I walked by. And that's true, because you will go and get a show.
I mean, I think it's a good idea. You always have to look to see how you can improve things and hold people accountable, but you need to be careful. But this is earlier, and you know, I think it's good, at least that the Hazleton area has been slotted to be a pilot program, and we'll continue to follow that. Mr. John, we are out of time. Again, thank you for coming here. We appreciate it. Keep us posted as things move forward. Mike, always good to see you. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here on Inside Scoop. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great evening.